In 2002, Spider-Man finally web-slinged his way onto the big screen after many years of failed attempts to get one of Marvel's most well-known and most well-loved superheroes into the world of cinema. Directed by movie legend Sam Raimi and starring Tobey Maguire, William Dafoe, Kirsten Dunst and James Franco, and with a powerful heroic theme by movie composer Danny Elfman, Spider-Man was a huge and welcomed hit for its time, and revitalized the superhero genre, making $100 million on its opening weekend, an achievement never done before. Yes, Marvel comic movies had started to gain momentum in previous years thanks to Blade and X-Men, but Spider-Man 2002 felt more like a contemporary superhero film, and took the superhero genre out of the slum that it was put in after Batman and Robin. And although the movie has aged, with some parts of it seeming dated now, it still has heart and spirit and kickstarted the modern obsession with superhero movies, which is still going on even to this day. Of course, it tells the story of nerdy school kid Peter Parker, who gets bitten by a genetically advanced spider, which gives him amazing spider-like superpowers, and after the sad passing of his Uncle Ben, he uses his powers to become Spider-Man, to fight crime while also dealing with issues in his personal life, such as his love for his childhood friend Mary Jane Watson and caring for his Aunt May. But while New York is in awe of Spider-Man, Norman Osborn, the father of Peter's best friend Harry, goes mad after a performance-enhancing experiment gone wrong, when he becomes the Green Goblin, who aims to terrorize the city and wants to get Spider-Man on his path of destruction at any cost, to which Spider-Man must defeat this new evil and live up to his uncle's prophecy of with great power comes great responsibility. So today we are going to celebrate the amazing life of Stan Lee by looking into one of his greatest creations by exploring 10 things that you may not know about the 2002 Spider-Man movie. Yes, it's cheesy and cliched, but I think the movie was trying to recapture the feel of the Christopher Reeve Superman movies. But underneath its now awkward camp moments, it still has depth and character development and is serious when it needs to be. So, let's check it out.
Remember, with great power comes great responsibility.
Number 10. James Cameron was going to direct. So the big question is, who would take on the mammoth task of bringing everyone's favourite neighbourhood Spider-Man onto the big screen? Well, who else better to turn to than James Cameron, who was the biggest director of that time thanks to Titanic. Cameron worked on the script and drew up some storyboards throughout the 90s when the Cannon Film Group were trying to make a Spider-Man film. But after Cannon Films collapsed, Cameron then got Corico Pictures involved in the project. Some of his ideas even made it in the final film, such as Peter's web shooters actually being an organic part of his hand, rather than a device that he makes. However, Cameron's script was drastically different, as it was going to be more violent with tons of profanity, and a scene where Peter Parker spies on Mary Jane getting undressed, which is just disturbing. The script also would have seen Spider-Man taking on the villains Electro and Dr. Octopus. I remember it being announced on the Australian version of E! Entertainment in the late 90s that Cameron would be directing a Spider-Man movie, and that they were considering Leonardo DiCaprio and Heath Ledger for the role of Spider-Man. Also, apparently Cameron wanted Arnold Schwarzenegger to play Dr. Octopus. But just like Cannon Films, Corico went bust, to which Sony acquired the rights to Spider-Man in 1999 and were interested in some of Cameron's ideas, but progressed the story into a different direction, where they got film writer David Coep to work on the script. Number 9. The real-life awkwardness of that kiss. Spider-Man features the now famous upside-down kiss, which everyone at that time thought was so romantic, with the image of Spider-Man and Mary Jane Watson kissing in a dark alley in the rain, which itself has become a part of pop culture in its own right.
I think I have a superhero stalker. I was in the neighborhood.
However, filming this scene was anything but romantic, as Tobey Maguire really struggled filming that scene on the account that he was upside down, which is pretty uncomfortable as it is. But because of all the water pouring down on the actors, his nose and sinuses kept getting blocked with water. Yeah, not so sexy when you find that out. In fact, Maguire really had his work cut out for him when it came to Spider-Man, as he had to go on a strict 5-month exercise and diet training program to get himself in shape, along with the fact that the suit was perfectly molded to his body, meaning toilet breaks were out of the question unless he took the entire suit off. He had also never read a Spider-Man comic book before signing on for the part. He just did it because he generally liked the script. Number 8. Spider-Man is the first movie to use the iconic Marvel logo. We all know the now famous iconic Marvel logo that is used at the start of Marvel-related movies, in which we see pages of comic books turning before blending away with the Marvel logo approaching. Well, Spider-Man was the first movie to use this groundbreaking logo. Shortly after Spider-Man, Daredevil, Hulk and X-Men 2 came out, which also acquired the logo, and the rest was history. In recent years, the Marvel Studios company has now changed the logo to make it look more epic and to tie in more with the official cinematic Marvel universe. However, for many of us growing up, this was the most recognizable Marvel logo and arguably the most influential, and it all started in 2002 with Spider-Man. Number 7. Tragedy caused changes to the movie. Spider-Man was filmed in New York in early 2001, so naturally there was going to be shots with the Twin Towers in the background. However, after the devastating 9/11 attacks, it was decided to remove all footage from the movie featuring the once iconic towers. This was achieved by removing them digitally and reshooting certain scenes. Even the original unused poster saw the towers reflected in the eyes of Spider-Man's mask, which caused the poster to be reworked. One early trailer saw a robbery gone wrong, in which Spider-Man captures some robbers and leaves their helicopter caught in a giant spider's web in between the towers. It is claimed that this scene was removed due to what happened on that fateful day. However, the official verdict is that the sequence was always just intended to be footage purely for the movie's early trailer, to get everyone excited for Spider-Man. Number 6. The Green Goblin was going to have a completely different look. In Spider-Man 2002, legendary screen actor Willem Dafoe plays the Green Goblin, in which it feels like he's channeling Jack Nicholson's Joker. Whether you like this approach or not, you can't deny that Dafoe chews up every scene that he's in, and you can just tell the guy's having a ball being evil. However, one thing that often gets criticised is the Green Goblin's look, in which the Goblin's face that the character is most well known for is displayed as a helmet in the movie. Many fans felt that this look let the character down. However, originally the Green Goblin was going to look more faithful to how he was seen in the comic books. Early concept art shows that they were really going for an out-of-this-world, almost H.R. Giger look. However, the approach they nearly went with was this animatronic mask, which looks like the original Green Goblin design, along with moving facial features, which looked way more organic and way more creepy than what we ended up with. This could have been the look for the movie as we know it, but no, they went with the weird Robo-Goblin helmet instead.
You really pissed me off.
Which begs to ask, why was this animatronic look not used? After all, it's a way more superior and faithful look. Number 5. Sam Raimi was hired because he was a massive comic book fan. Throughout Spider-Man's production, many directors were brought on board at some stage to potentially direct the movie, including Chris Columbus, Tony Scott and M. Night Shyamalan. At one stage, even Alien 3 and 7 director David Fincher was on board to direct the movie, and he had some of his own ideas as to what the movie should be. He didn't want it to be an origin movie, but instead focusing on the night Gwen Stacy died comic book storyline. But Sony didn't want to pursue Fincher's ideas. Horror director Sam Raimi may have seen an odd choice at the time, as he was most well known for directing the Evil Dead trilogy. However, he already did have a brush with superhero movies, as 12 years earlier he directed Darkman, a sadistic, dark, brutal, crime-fighting movie starring Liam Neeson. Raimi was picked because he was an avid Spider-Man fan and apparently even had a ginormous comic book collection. Raimi also injected some of his own ideas into the movie, mainly just focusing on the Green Goblin as a villain, as the script originally focused on the Green Goblin and Dr. Octopus. This was done as he felt the father and son struggle of Harry and Norman Osborn would make the story deeper, especially considering Harry is Peter's best friend, and that conflict between the three characters should speak for itself. And he's right, it does add more character drama to the piece. Number 4, a special effects legend worked on the movie. Spider-Man 2002 employs the services of movie special effects legend John Dykstra. Dykstra is a very influential part of modern movie special effects, being one of the co-founders of Industrial Light and Magic, and providing effects for Star Wars, Battlestar Galactica, Star Trek the Motion Picture, and Batman Forever. However, to me personally, having Dykstra on board was something of a double-edged sword. Yes, a lot of the special effects for the movie he provides looks great, but Dykstra opted to have a lot of the action scenes with Spider-Man to use computer graphics to stand in for Spider-Man in order to accomplish maneuvers and stunts that were impossible for humans to perform, which, although on paper sounds great, in the good old days of 2002, the CGI shots of Spider-Man do look incredibly animated and cartoonish. But still, it was a special effects technique that was in its infancy stage, so we have to give credit for the ambitious approach. So does Spider-Man in the 2002 movie look too computer generated, or should it just be shrugged off as a special effect of its time? Well, as with all art, it depends on the eye of the beholder. Number 3, James Franco auditioned for the role of Spider-Man. Yes, before James Franco was Tommy Wiseau, he was Peter Parker's troubled best friend Harry Osborn. And before that, he was actually considered for the role of Spider-Man himself. Many actors were considered for the role, including Leonardo DiCaprio and Heath Ledger as mentioned, along with Chris Klein and Wes Bentley. And at one stage, a huge runner-up for the part was Freddie Prinze Jr. But Raimi wasn't sold on the actor, who was something of a teen heartthrob at the time. And Raimi even said, quote, "He won't even be allowed to buy a ticket to see this film." And yes, one of the young actors to audition for the role of Spider-Man was James Franco himself, who instead got the part of Harry. And to do so, he had to dye his hair blonde to make him look more like William Dafoe. Tobey Maguire auditioned for the role and was cast because Raimi was impressed with his performance in The Cider House Rules. In addition to that, Raimi's original choice for Mary Jane Watson was Alicia Witt, of which the part ended up going to Kirsten Dunst, a role which required her to dye her hair to match the famous red locks seen in the comic books. And both Nicolas Cage and Christopher Walken were considered for the role of Norman Osborn, aka the Green Goblin. Number 2, Stan Lee made his second cameo. It's become something of a tradition with Marvel-related movies that at some stage Stan Lee will pop up to make a humorous cameo, much to the delight of Marvel fans. Yes, over the years, whether it's a librarian, security guard, or even a mailman, one of Marvel's pioneers who created many of our beloved superheroes turns up to wink and nod at the viewers.
I am so fired.
Spider-Man marks Lee's second cameo, where he plays a pedestrian looking up in shock at an explosion caused by the Green Goblin. At that stage, the Stan Lee cameos were kind of a blink and you'll miss them kind of thing, and he wasn't talking in them at that stage either. But hey, it was a starting point for what would become a much-loved tradition. The first Stan Lee cameo was in the first X-Men movie, in which Lee plays a bystander at the beach. Although if you want to get technical, I guess you could say the actual first Stan Lee cameo was in the 1989 TV movie Trial of the Incredible Hulk, where he plays a member of the jury.
You know, I guess one person can make a difference.
Number 1, Spider-Man 2002 was intended to be set in the same universe as the X-Men movies. Yes, these days it seems commonplace for superhero movies to have a shared universe, with characters from different franchises making appearances in other superhero movies, thanks to the likes of both the Marvel and DC cinematic universes. But the 2002 Spider-Man movie was kind of ahead of its game, as it was intended for the movie to be set in the same universe as the X-Men movies. The first X-Men movie came out 2 years prior in the year 2000, and the second one was released the following year after Spider-Man in 2003. And Spider-Man was to feature a cameo by Wolverine himself, Hugh Jackman. And this wasn't some random idea that was scrapped along the way either. Jackman actually travelled to New York to the Spider-Man set in anticipation for filming his cameo. So what went wrong? Well, apparently Jackman couldn't get the Wolverine suit on loan from 20th Century Fox, so thus the intended cameo was scrapped. I would argue that Wolverine doesn't have to be in his leather X-Men suit to make a cameo, but oh well, it is what it is. So, to conclude, I just want to say my farewells to Stan Lee, who lived an extraordinary life full of many great accomplishments. He is such an influential part of many of people's lives spanning many generations. He was not only a pioneer of comic books, but of publishing in general. He gave us wonderful comics, and in return we opened our imaginations to many wonders and possibilities. So with this sad passing, I would like to say thank you to Stan Lee. Thanks for the wonderment and adventures, and thanks for brightening many of our days when we needed the escapism from the hardships of the real world. Stan Lee may have passed, but his legacy and what he created will always live on, making him creatively immortal. Anyway, I'm Minty, and Excelsior! Okay, so this video's poll was who is the best movie Spider-Man? Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, or Tom Holland? And oh boy, were emotions running high in the comments section with this one, with a very close call. Tom Holland won by 3 votes, coming in at 79. Tobey Maguire came close second with 76, leaving Andrew Garfield behind at just 14. I noticed with the voting, the older generation tended to vote for Maguire, whereas the younger ones were voting for Holland, which I guess makes sense. And I also noticed a lot of comments saying that Tobey Maguire would be their best Spider-Man, but were let down by the emo Peter Parker and all those dancing sequences from Spider-Man 3, which also makes sense. Anyway guys, thanks for taking part, bye for now.